Paladins are a D&D class which is considered the most moral, oftentimes serving the role of the moral compass of an adventuring party. However, does it really have to be the case? Do paladins really always have to be the pure knight in shining armor archetype? Well, in my opinion, no. And if you wish to know how to create an evil paladin, then welcome to Dungeon Hussars, where today I'll show you the way. In history, the title Paladin or Comes Palatinus was one of the most esteemed ones. In Merovingian France, the palatins were taking the roles of military and civilian governors, feudal lords, judges and king's advisors. But the current image of the paladin does not come from those noble titles. Rather, it is derived from the 12 closest companions of Charlemagne, who took a comparable role to the Knights of the Round Table, and they were viewed as the paragon of Christianity, as the great force guarding Europe against Saracen invasion. Moreover, within the ranks of those knights, there was one traitor which we can compare to our modern oath-breakers. Therefore, one could assume that paladins in a traditional sense have to be good, and paladins would be outright branded as the good ones, or be reduced to just evil oath-breakers. However, currently in D&D, a paladin is a character who devotes themselves to either a god or an idea. I think this forms the basis and is the most important aspect of a paladin, as I think contemporaneously, a paladin is a character whose devotion to an ideal is so grand that they are able to draw power from that. Thus, making an evil one should not be a problem, as ideas are in general very rarely evil or harmful directly, with people who believe in them often rationalizing their evil actions as a form of serving the greater good. So paladins do not have to be those paragons of good, but rather they can swear an oath to an ideal which may be considered selfish and establish tenets that allow them to act in a way that can be considered at least questionable. Moreover, some ideas may make deeds that are normally recognized as immoral a necessity in order to upkeep their ways. There are even instances of officially printed subclasses implementing this into their design with the Vengeance and Conquest paladins. For me, the case of a paladin swearing an oath to a selfish ideal and being not necessarily good expands upon the concept of paladins being faithful to an ideal rather than a god. This can lead into some more interesting possibilities for your character and generally for the campaign's story, as paladins who serve a warped ideal can serve as a contrast to normally good paladins as well as add more dynamism to the characters. Giving a paladin a risk of becoming a fallen warrior by taking their oath to an extreme adds depth to the character. For example, a devotion paladin could become an overzealous fanatic, and this concept isn't even uncommon, as I've seen many players create such characters whose fanaticism becomes less dominant as the campaign progresses. This leads to another benefit of allowing paladins to serve morally ambiguous ideas. They might eventually realize that their past actions were not justified and seek redemption. Thus, the possibility of becoming a fallen warrior or pursuing redemption creates many more opportunities for rich character conflict, in turn enhancing the storytelling. Therefore, in order to create an evil paladin, we first have to design it upon an ideal which in itself allows or even encourages performing quite repulsive deeds. This will make the core of the oath, thereby the tenets of said oath should also be corrupted. For today's video I will go with populism as the ideal upon which the oath is created, with those who have sworn this oath as ones who desire to acquire as much power as possible through persuasion, which in turn can lead to some immoral actions. Another thing that we need to establish are the oath's tenets, as well as the core beliefs of its followers. In the case of the Oath of Populism, paladins who follow this path focus on gathering as much power as possible by all means necessary. Those paladins do not consider manipulation or straight-up lying unacceptable, and even encourage resorting to those tactics if it will result in them gaining power or support. Therefore, they're pretty infamous for being mind-controlling sophists. They can also rationalize their actions by stating that their actions are merely a means to an end. like overthrowing a tyrant, or maybe stating that they will perform good deeds when they finally are the one who rules. And those paladins, in my opinion, do not fall under some other oath for the very simple reason that their actions are incentivized by some grand idea that could also change over time and be validated. However, they are even more so incentivized by their pursuit of influence and control, basically focusing more on the means than their actual objective. I do believe that abilities that a subclass has should be derived from the main idea that runs through a subclass. Hence, for me, a subclass which is so focused on gaining more influence that the idea of populism empowers them should be the charismatic leader trope taken to an extreme. Convincing, manipulating, and the masters of control, as were the historic examples of leaders using their charisma in order to later become rulers. This is reflected both in their spell list and in their regular abilities, starting from amplifying the emotions of one creature, forcing it to make blind attacks on their turn and just stand in one place. As you progress in the campaign, the paladin gets an aura of authority and near-perfect control of the situation, making creatures in proximity to the paladin more susceptible to enchantment spells or other mind-controlling abilities. Later, it gains a feature allowing it to redirect ability strength to control the paladin if they succeed on a saving throw against them, finally allowing the paladin to become the most charismatic leader, making controlling others way easier for them. As you can see, this is a more control-focused paladin whose abilities allow them to influence others, thus aiding them in accomplishing their goals to gain as much support as possible and control their enemies. And that's basically it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching it until the end. In the link in the description you can find the subclass sheet, and I also invite you to share your feedback about this subclass on our Discord server. The link is also in the description. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, then I would be very grateful if you left a like, commented and subscribed to the channel. For now, goodbye and see you next week.